Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. I'm Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Bryson Bort. Bryson, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here, Chris.
Yeah, man, I've been trying to catch up with you and chat for a while. I've been following your LinkedIn presence for quite a while now, man, but we finally got schedules to align. But for folks that don't know you, haven't come across your profile or your activity in the community, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I was an Army officer. I got hurt during the war. Went and did a stint in global manufacturing, and then I got intelligence. Okay, you muted my mic. Am I good again?
Sorry about that. Yeah, you're good.
I was recruited into the intelligence community. I helped build an elite counterterrorism group. Greatest job I ever had. I would say every golden cage rusts. So 11 years ago, I wanted to go out on my own. So I started an offensive consultancy called GRIMM, which was my nickname. That sounded a lot cooler than Bryson's consultancy. So I went with GRIMM and the graphics. And in 2016, Target came to me and asked me to build them a one-off tool. I was surprised and then realized that that's called product market fit. So that's what created Scythe. At the time, we called it Project Crossbow. So it's a post-access modular malware platform. It's the ability to recreate any payload or any threat behavior from scratch. So you can realistically generate signal in your environment and really be able to test people and tech. Co-developed them with them for 2 years, realized I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And that's when I raised VC funding with Ron Gula from Tenable, Dmitry Alperovich from CrowdStrike to form my board. And I spun it out of GRIMM. So that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. I'm also the co-founder of a nonprofit called the ICS Village. You probably have seen us at RSA or DEF CON, where we've been at for many, many years. And I did that with Tom Van Norman. So we have our own policy conference that's actually coming up shortly called Hack the Capitol. And it's focused on tying the security researchers in the community and industry with members of Congress so that, if you want to complain about the regulations, now you can't because you actually got to meet them. So that's coming up the end of May in Washington, D.C. There will be a virtual option to be able to attend and watch the streams. I am a senior fellow at the National Security Institute and a senior technical advisor at the Institute for Security and Technology. They're best known for the Ransomware Task Force. And I just recently have been appointed to the advisory board at West Point for electrical engineering and computer science. I think that's most of my bio.
Yeah, safe to say you have a pretty diverse and awesome background. I was curious, looking at that, what made you want to take that leap? You had a pretty accomplished career as a practitioner. What made you want to take that leap and found a company and go down that crazy path? What made you take that chance?
Do you mean when I started GRIMM or when I started Scythe?
The first one, yeah. I'll get to the second one in a moment too.
Sure. So GRIMM, success not only breeds mediocrity, but it breeds a bunch of staff people fighting with you to make your job harder. So I got frustrated with trying to complete the missions while trying to take care of my people. And as we became more successful and bigger, it was just a lot more of those ankle biters who didn't have anything to do with anything other than they were some little number person over there. And I was like, I can do this on my own. So it was just a point of frustration. I figured if I do it all on my own, then who else do I have to blame than me? I mean, I am the creator of the system. I am the creator of the vision. If there's a problem, it's my problem. At this point, I'm ready to try that. I was scared though. I'll be honest. It was not something I took lightly. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, planning it. And it's funny when you spend all of that time planning and working, and then you pretty much learn that most of that work isn't right as you go out and learn and discover. For those of you who are interested in starting your own company, if you Google my name and entrepreneurial adventures, I've given a number of talks for the last 4 or 5 years on different aspects of how to think through starting your own company. And even if you don't, there's a lot of interesting information where I think practitioners don't realize company economics and why companies work the way they do, which is incredibly valuable to understand and know.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, you talked about, I've often heard the phrase like, don't mix, product and services. And you seem like you've kind of stuck to that mantra in the sense that you have 2 different companies, but you are also the founder of both companies. So, how has it been going from services to a product company? What are some distinctions or, unique challenges you face in each kind of regard?
Yeah, so I cover some of this in the talk, but fundamentally, you have to recognize that unit economics are different. A service company is built on its people. And how you make money is tied to the person. And you can charge a lot for an hourly rate. You can charge a little for an hourly rate. At the end of the day, it comes down to person's time for the most part. And that's why you're going to scale. You're going to grow organically. It's also why you're not going to take investment. And so I really enjoyed that part, from starting from one person and then growing GRIMM to many people, because I could have a really strong emphasis on culture, because it was much easier to do it since you grew slowly and organically with everything. A product company, completely different. 1 hour of time, 100 hours of time, it doesn't matter. It's what is that final product result, and what's the value of that? What do customers think the value proposition, and what would they be willing to pay for that? That is the entire driving thing. So it's not about the people so much as what the customer's value proposition is of what you built. The other thing I do appreciate about being a product vendor now is consultants. It's some of the fun is the fact that you're being brought into all of these variable different problem sets and all these different companies. And so there's a lot of solutioning and learning, and it takes a lot of effort to walk that through. In a product company, it's pretty simple. Do you want my thing? Do you not want my thing? That's it. Maybe you don't understand the thing. That's fair. But other than that, you either want the thing or you don't want the thing. And that's why it's so much simpler. Yep. That's
shared your entrepreneurial journey and your ventures thing in the chat here on LinkedIn, so people can check that out. I wanted to ask you, it seems like you talked about trying to find, like, do you want my thing or do you not want my thing? Given you had a services company, you were seeing like the pain of the folks firsthand, right? You're seeing the environments, the pain points, the challenges. Do you think that's benefited you, of like having that firsthand experience from the services side, where people, it sounds like you kind of like walked into product market fit, people came to you for that, versus kind of iterating, kind of stumbling and looking for that. It sounds like you might have had a great opportunity where you fell into it, and then you could take it from there and expand it from that first customer potentially.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, if you think about what it takes for a large company to hire a consultant for custom R&D, that means they've exhausted looking at the market, because there's not already something that you can just buy off of the catalog. And at that time, the only offensive tool that was really available was Cobalt Strike. And Cobalt Strike's a great tool. I mean, heck, there's a reason the adversaries use it as much as they do. But it wasn't built to solve the problem that I saw, which is that flexibility that you need to continually be able to grow and test what you do. Because the dirty secret of offense is that in a testing scenario, defense attenuates itself to it. Whatever I'm driving is whatever I am fixing. And you keep kind of doing this. And Cobalt Strike wasn't really meant for that. I mean, he didn't build it for that, which is fair. If I had to design an implant in 2012, I would have built it the same way, frankly. And so I come in 2016 with Target going, yeah, we've already seen that. We're good with that. We want something different. And that was really what they wanted, is they just wanted another quick version of a Cobalt Strike. And I saw that as an opportunity of, well, actually what you want is you want unlimited different versions of a Cobalt Strike. And so that's why I created Scythe the way that I did.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to ask it as well, like, what were some of the biggest challenges of going from a practitioner? Because you have this deep technical background where you were a hands-on practitioner and you bring a lot of technical depth. What were, if any, what were some of the challenges of transitioning from that to being like a business owner? Like, you're thinking in a different frame, the way you're operating, the things you spend your time focusing on are obviously much different. What was that like?
Well, so, I mean, by the end there, I wouldn't have called myself hands-on at all. I was a senior executive in charge of multiple teams. I didn't touch any keyboard other than to put an Excel box that way or make the PowerPoint this way. I mean, that was it. I wasn't coding anything. So I think I already had a pretty strong understanding of the fundamentals. Being an entrepreneur, though, there's more, but it's kind of like I had to learn what health insurance was, and wherever that was. I had to learn how to set up payroll myself. I mean, at the end of the day, all of those things you take for granted that a large system provides you, I had to do. I wouldn't say they were hard or complicated. It was just a lot. And this goes back to the talk I give on entrepreneurship, is the two qualities that I see are not about brains or good looks, because otherwise I'd fail, but around passion and the tolerance for BS, because the passion is that this idea not existing has to bother you so much that you're willing to sacrifice all of this for that. And then the second part, the tolerance for BS, is guess what? All that administrative stuff that you got to sneer your nose at, like, oh, human resources, guess what? You get to do that.
Yeah, I can speak firsthand because I have a consulting company, and I've been trying to grow it out, and I've spent a lot of time doing things I didn't imagine I'd find myself doing, and things that are not in the cyber realm. I was going to ask you too, like on the services side, like there's a saying of like working in the business versus on the business. How has that been on the services front, especially when you started that? Like you're looking to scale, you're trying to grow it. But like obviously when you begin, a lot of it orients around you and your expertise and your relationships and things like that. How have you navigated like working in versus on the business?
Yeah. So what I was just looking for is, first off, if anybody is interested in this, the best book that I've seen that succinctly shows how to start a consulting business in infosec is Ted Demopolis's book. Highly encourage everyone to check that out if you're interested. Yeah, in the start, it's you. And I get a lot of this from younger folks. They're like, I'm interested in starting a consulting company. I'm like, until everybody knows who you are, you can't do anything, because they can't question your value. It doesn't work. You have to be a known entity. You have to be something where I know what I'm getting, right? Because you are the product and I need to know what I'm buying. And it's not like I can go to a website and be like, oh, well, that makes me feel comfortable, right? You have to be known. So you have to build that. And that gives you two things. One, of course, it gives you the domain expertise to be very good at what you do, because they're taking a risk by going to you as opposed to going to IBM, which sure, IBM is going to cost a lot and the results probably won't be as good. But you know what? I know what I'm going to get. The saying is, I never get fired for hiring IBM, but I will get fired for taking a chance on a Chris that I don't know. Then the second part is, because of your reputation and being known, it's a lot easier to organically drive business development because people know who you are. So they're like, oh, we have that job. We thought of Chris. We thought of Bryson. So we're going to reach out and ask him. Business development, also funny enough, is not the hardest part. This is the sad, scary thing. Getting the work, doing the work, not the hardest part of consulting. Getting paid for the work is the hardest part of consulting. Nobody pays you on time. And some folks just take months to never pay you. And I can still remember the very first time I learned that lesson hard. And I want to say it was the end of the second year of GRIMM. We were coming into Christmas and we were like 4 days from going, like, I wouldn't be able to make payroll. And I was just like, and I had 6 customers who just had not paid me. So I just picked the first one and I was like, please, for the love of God, pay me. If you like what I do and you want me to keep doing it, you have to pay me, because I can't keep going. And so I got that one payroll through, and then I put a lot more effort into making sure I was getting paid, because I wasn't going to let that cash collections kill the idea, just because people don't pay on time. Again, I did all the work. I did a great job. You can't pay me? Are you kidding? It drives me wild.
Yeah, I was going to ask as well, like, you talked about, the product versus the services company, and the services side sounds like it was kind of bootstrap. It grew organically, as you talked about, but the product side, obviously you need capital, right? It's resource intensive, R&D, marketing, sales, et cetera, kind of is a different a beast, for example. What are some, distinctions of like, taking capital, not now some new considerations, right? Or things that you're dealing with that maybe you're not dealing with on the organic side when you're just growing organically via services.
Yeah, so it's funny, I've never really quantified it, and I was starting to do the math in my head while you were asking the question, because from the start of the initial co-development contract with Target, and in parallel with that, I went and in 2.5 years, 3 years, up through the seed raise in the fall of 2018, I had about 1,000 conversations with different folks to try to understand what the market was. First lesson learned: no one cares what you built. That's not it. Don't be an engineer. Again, you talk about the technical background, and I thought, I will technically describe. Well, how much easier than it be? Like, this is a pen. This is what it does. And they were like, yeah, I don't get it. Like, is it this kind of pen? Is it that kind of pen? I'm like, oh my God, this is so complicated. It was so frustrating. And I literally would find phrases or words that would connect with somebody. I'd be like, okay, writing that down. That worked. And then I would try that on someone else, and I would build, and I would keep doing all these permutations until I truly started to understand what the product was. And because it wasn't what I was building, it was what it meant. And that's different. And so I was doing the math. And from that start in 2016 until the fall of 2019 was when we closed our first customer. And that was about 20 to 25 FTE years worth of work. Think about that. 20 to 25 years of work to finally close a first customer. That is capital intensive. That also, I think, speaks to the mistake that I made strategically at that time, which is the fact that what I initially built would be classified as a red team tool. Chris, do you know what the red team product market is globally?
Probably very narrow. Yeah.
It's almost zero. That is not a market. That is a fun hobby, which is why you see a lot. It's why you see a few of the command and control tools being built by individuals, which you can pretty much do part-time out of your garage. And that makes sense. A real enterprise tool does not make sense. And so once I learned that lesson, and again, with my technical background from the government, I'd also made some assumptions on what commercial offensive tooling would require. And those were wrong because and I don't mean to insult anybody, but I am going to insult you. I saw what I did in government as like painting a Rembrandt. And I looked at commercial offense and take the technical part out of it. Commercial business, as we already defined, for a market that doesn't really exist, isn't willing to pay that much. So there's already inherently a compromise in what it's going to be able to do, because you don't actually need to pay for an APT. You just need to pay for this level of thing. And so I made a number of those compromises. And our initial, because the platform was modular, and I thought, no problem. Anybody can code in C++. There is almost no red team development capability at all. They throw together some Python scripts and they call it a day at best. They are mostly operators. And again, that's not mean. That's actually how it works in government too. The operators are good at operating and they know all the things to do that, but development isn't really a part of the requirement. And so there's an example of where I made a tactical stupid mistake in thinking, sure, anybody can code in C++. Therefore, we're modular. No, we are not, and no, it did not. We solved that. We incorporated Python, and we made it even more flexible in a lot of ways since, but just kind of showing how ignorant I was in terms of what my experience was versus reality. And strategically, where I thought I was building for this market, and there was literally no market at all, which is where you saw us really start to help. I mean, I don't know that I get the title of creator, because it's one of those things like multiple of us did it, but I was certainly part of the folks who did create and popularize purple teaming. And the reason I did that was because that's where the money was, right? There's no money for red team other than people. And blue team, right? They have rounding errors from their upsell from Splunk that could pay for like all of this stuff. So I was like, well, there's clearly budget there. And it's red teams are failing spectacularly in terms of supporting the business. So what if I helped make that easier for them to work together, and then the blue team would share that budget so everybody won from it? And that was where I pivoted strategically.
Yeah, I was going to ask you before we move on, purple teaming is obviously gaining much more traction. It's definitely like a term that people are more familiar with. But for some folks in the audience, maybe they're newer to the career field or haven't heard the term. What exactly is purple teaming?
Sure. So besides the phrase, the concept really has been around for a while. And as I joke, everybody on here has graduated preschool. So you know your primary colors, red and blue together is purple. So the red team and blue team collaboratively working together. I do like to pitch a broader definition though, because I think that's still too limiting and it's still too much IT and infosec talking to it's not even IT. It's infosec talking to itself. So my definition is a collaborative, milestone-driven exercise. Collaborative because why is it only the red and the blue team? Why not bring in IT and infrastructure? Why not bring in the business unit that you're looking at? The more people that are involved in this, the better. And then milestone-driven because the traditional way that we break the milestone down during the exercise is the actual attack procedure. And I want to emphasize that. You probably heard of tactics and techniques. Anybody who talks about that is talking up here, and you can't actually implement that. It's like, do all the credential theft. What does that mean? Oh, this is the exact command for credential theft I'm doing. That I can do something with. So it's procedural. The milestone that is broader than that, though, is it might be a business outcome. It might be an attacker outcome. So it might be a set of actions that we want to stop and reevaluate in the exercise of what did they do. The other thing that, for those of you, because most people at this point are familiar with pen testing and red teaming, we recommend purple teaming as the starting point for your risk assessments for this reason. One, it's collaborative. So it is, we plan together, we do it together, we fix together, as opposed to a traditional offensive test, which most folks are used to. Hey, those elite hacker dudes went away, did something, threw a report at our head, and we're there left trying to go, well, who's going to help fix it? And they're gone, right? They cashed the check if you paid them on time, and they left. Purple teaming, you don't do that. You actually are building and going through this together. So the outcome isn't a report. The outcome is you actually fix things in the environment. Less work. Oh, wow. I didn't know my thing did that. Cool. Did you do that? Did I do that?
I did not do that. That was all your computer there. I don't know how it did that. But really cool.
It has never responded to anything I've ever did, and apparently isn't even doing it now again. Okay. Well, let's take it. It was perfect timing. Fireworks when you do purple teaming. See, even Apple knows.
Yeah, I like what you said there, though. I mean, really, the kind of theme of what you're talking about is like breaking down silos, collaborating, and not just within the security team, but beyond that, broader to the other engineering, development, business functions, and so on, which is really what we need to do to get to actual outcomes for the business to mitigate risk. So I like the way you framed it. I wanted to ask you too. Coming down to the last couple of questions here, is you kind of have an intersection of entrepreneurship, but also the veteran community that I know you're very passionate about. And, we shared that entrepreneurial adventure, resource that you shared from VetSecCon. But any other advice for aspiring, cybersecurity professionals aside from that resource, if they're looking to, maybe they're a CISO, maybe they're a really technical professional, they want to move to start their own company, maybe some things to be cautious about or optimistic about, or, missteps to watch out for, that kind of thing.
Start by making fun of the Marines because they take themselves too seriously, and then always make fun of the Air Force because they weren't in the military anyway. The reason that there is such a prevalence of veterans in the space is because the U.S. government is one of the largest investors in the people and the requirement for cybersecurity in many different ways. So it only naturally makes sense that all of that investment in training translates to a very useful, skilled population to recruit from. I don't know that I necessarily agree with the numbers that always get thrown around about the cybersecurity shortages, but I think we can all point to the fact that unemployment is basically negative and we're always going to be in demand. Congratulations, because cybersecurity can never be solved. You have the best job security of any domain there is today. And then also that ties into where a lot of the processes and culture that fit in the information security community in enterprise matches a similar government and military mindset. So you have folks who've not only been trained, but already think a certain way, and they fit right in very easily.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And obviously we see this in other countries who invest a lot in cybersecurity. Like, people largely come out of the military, go out, either begin in cybersecurity, start cybersecurity companies. Obviously Israel being a notable example of that. I wanted to ask you too, just because you brought this up, I know you're passionate about the military community. They do invest a lot of resources in cybersecurity, skill, talent, and development and so on. But they also struggle terribly to attract and retain technical talent, including cybersecurity. Any thoughts on that front of like how we, how to mitigate that, or if we should even strive to mitigate that?
So the most common things that folks go to is about money. And I remember this when I was an Army officer. I mean, I didn't get paid very much, but frankly, I didn't care as much, because when you really feel fulfilled by the mission and what you're doing, that is money is a component. It is not the purpose. And so where I see the problem, it is getting folks aligned and treating them well with respect to what the mission is. And there are some times where, yeah, you have to be in a skiff. There can't be windows, and you need to be divorced from your phone. And that grinds over time. That's just tough. There's no way to make that better, right? There's no amount of potted plants that you can put in around your cubicle, and everybody knows that government smell. I mean, you're in it. It's what it is. But perhaps, other than that, I mean, right. I think government leadership needs to take it seriously, that they need to be really building their people up and showing the results of what they do. I think that's an area where the intelligence community, things being classified, it's like, you never really know the results of what you do. And so you're doing all this stuff and you're being told it's important, but what happened? And I think that's important to try to share some level of that so people can see how they are making a difference. It does matter. And that goes a long way. There is something about, I think it's really large system, because I get into this a lot with folks. We're like, oh, government this or military that. It's just a large system. You can look in commercial and see large systems, and you see the same kind of poor leadership or even toxic leadership. I think it's perhaps a little exacerbated in the military, but you can't treat people that way. And we do it for a lot of artificial reasons. I mean, we've all heard of the artificial deadline. Oh, it's due on Tuesday. Well, why is it really due on Tuesday? You just made that up. And we do those same kinds of things where there's artificial requirements, and we push that down on our people, and there's a cost. So as a leader, you need to have the courage to protect your people so that those artificial requirements are kept at bay and they feel valued, and that you really are trying to take care of them. The last thing, and this is going to be directed to government and military, because I made this mistake when I was in, you do not know as much as you think you do. I worked in like a very specialized space, and so we thought we were the smartest people on the planet. And again, listening to the mistakes that I've made as I transitioned over, there's a lot of really good stuff happening out in industry. And the only way to know about that is if you go out and talk and engage, and particularly the folks that have clearances. And again, the arrogance of, look at what we do, we're the government. Bullshit. Put that aside. You don't have to go spill secrets, but you can have conversations, and you'll be shocked not only what you learn, but the value of the relationships you're building with a lot of other really smart people and organizations that are out there. Because at the end of the day, we are all in this together, and it's a people business. And so working together is how it all works.
Yeah, I think those are some great answers. Mission focused, the fulfillment, treating people right, good leadership, and then obviously public-private partnership is a critical aspect of that too. So I got to ask you, just because I just thought about it while you were talking, is like, we recently saw another call for an independent cyber force. Where do you fall on that? Yay or nay?
So this is the idea that the services should not be where cyber resides, and cyber should be its own, just like the Space Force, its own cyber force. So we're clear, I think Space Force is ridiculous. And I have friends who have crossed over from being Army officers into being Space Force officers. And I do have to note that they really do enjoy what they're doing. They like the way they're treated. So I'm happy for them. I think there should be a US cyber force. And the reason for that is not because of where we are. So cyber is theoretically the fifth domain, which means the same way that I can create impact in air, space, land, and sea should be the way I can create impact in cyber. And the reality is that's not true. It doesn't work that way. We have some high-level strategic assets, but we do not really have where a platoon leader could call for cyber effect. I'll share a story. I was on a plane with he was the former 4-star combat commander for Korea. And I asked him, I was like, hey, General, what was your experience with using cyber? And he's like, I would send in a request. It would go to the Pentagon. 15 lieutenant colonels would chop it up, and I would get nothing. This guy was a combatant commander and couldn't get anything, right? Now, imagine being a lieutenant or a captain. You're getting less. So mostly where we found cyber is the use in intelligence, right? Being able to have better intel on what's going on and using that. My point being is a unified cyber that actually is service independent would hopefully then be able to create the mass for cyber to become a true fifth domain effect, which I believe it can be. But the investment and focus to do that requires a hell of a lot more than has been spent so far.
Makes sense. Yeah, I don't argue with you. I think you're spot on. And I showed the book in the comment for folks not familiar with the book Fifth Domain. Definitely check that out. Another great plug is a book called, I think it's called A Cyber War. Not Cyber War, Battlefield Cyber. That's it. Yeah, that's another great book. If you haven't read that one, definitely check that out. And your comment, we're all in this together, made me think of that one. So last question for you that I ask everyone is, what does the term cyber resiliency mean to you?
So right before I answer that, finishing from the previous, there is going to be a talk that I'm going to be giving with Greg Conti at some point. I don't know when. We both need to find the right time and the right place where we are actually going to lay out the vision for what we think it would require to truly build that fifth domain effect. So teaser.
Yeah, definitely keep the community posted. I'd love to check it out and share it.
Sure. I think cyber resilience is easy to define. It is understanding the ability to do the 5 phases of the NIST CSF. Identify, what do I got? protect. What's my ability? This is like the only time this has ever worked for me. It's so funny. I'm like, now I got my little thumbs up there. See, it doesn't do it again. It's nothing. Okay. Identify, knowing what I got. Protect, my ability to prevent unauthorized access. I am going to put an aside on that one. We psychologically need to get over the fact that we are going to be breached. I cannot tell you how many CISOs I talk to where I'm like, the perimeter is dead. They'll go, the perimeter is dead. And then we talk about their budget, and 95% of their budget goes to the perimeter. What are you doing? You know, adding sharks with laser beams does not make you more secure, no matter how cool it looks. It doesn't work. So I am not suggesting that proper exposure management and hygiene is not important, but I am saying it is a losing battle. Over time, success approaches zero. You will be breached. Get over it. Instead, focus on detection and response and recovery, which are the final 3 phases. Recognizing that the most important 2 parts in the detection are the fact that there is post-breach to where they're doing things that you do not know about, and that's called dwell time. There is a direct correlation between dwell time and impact to your organization. That's the other thing I'd like to point out. All of the detect, respond, and recover, those post-access actions on objective where the attacker is doing things, is on assets you control, talking the way you do things, and is the only part that you can in fact control. You cannot really control protection and prevention. You can have a level of hardening, but it's not ever 100%. So, right, where you're getting the most ROI for it, and particularly as budgets have gotten harder, you really need to, as an executive, be thinking of the return on investment versus trying to cover all the things. And I believe everybody at this point understands breaches are going to happen. And it's more like, can you justify your plan, your process, and that you validated those plans and those processes? So resilience, ability to do those 5 phases with the biggest emphasis on detection, respond, and recover, which, finishing that second point, is going to be tying into all the government regulations that are coming, which are time to report. In critical infrastructure, I was just thinking about this yesterday. TSA Security Directive 02 says you have to report a breach or an incident within 12 hours. In the SEC, it's 4 hours or 4 days. In New York regulation, it is 4 days. With CISA, it is not only 4 days to report, but you have to include a lot of technical IOC and detail in that report. So it's more than just the awareness, the materiality, because that's a financial perspective. We're now getting into the technical sharing so that it is crowdsourced threat intelligence for everybody else. You better have a pretty good understanding of detection to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think while you were saying that, a few things jumped out to me. One is like we didn't even dive into the forthcoming wave of regulation, SEC, CISO with cyber incident reporting for critical infrastructure, and then also you talked about you reminded me of something that there's the cyber defense matrix from Sunil Yu for folks who haven't seen or heard of it. And he kind of lays out how disproportionately a lot of budget, tooling, et cetera, is focused on the earlier aspects of NIST and not where it should be on the recovery aspect that you talked about. So definitely think you're spot on there, and people need to check that talk out from Sunil, who's incredible as well. So Bryson, thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm glad to get a chance to chat with you and catch up. I've been trying to get you on the show for some time, and thanks to everyone who tuned in. I hope you all have a great weekend.